let's start the main panel. The outbreak of COVID-19 has brought unprecedented challenges to various sectors, but also gave rise to new business opportunities. Innovation and sustainability are deemed to be the key to succeed in the post-pandemic era. Speakers from different industries will share how their companies identified and captured new and exciting opportunities. We are pleased to have three renowned experts with us this afternoon. They are Mr. Herbert Chia, venture partner of Sequoia Capital China, Ms. Lucy Liu, co-founder and president of AirWallex. Today, Lucy is joining us from Shanghai. Dr. Mark Young, managing director, APAC and EMEA of Bloom Global. We are also delighted to have Mr. Nicholas Kwan, Director of Research, HKTDC, moderating this section for us. The floor is yours, Nick.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning for all those friends around the world with Hong Kong. It's delighted to have you joining us, both online and offline. It's a new normal that we probably won't see each other too frequently, but we'll be talking to each other all the time. Just now, Margaret have mentioned that in the coming years, we have three focus in the work of TDC as well as Hong Kong. One is innovation, one is sustainability, and the third one, of course, is China. In this section, we'll focus on the first two, but of course, we won't miss out the third one, China, when we talk about innovation as well as sustainability. Just now, we have mentioned that we have three speakers. The way I want to organize this next 1 hour is that we will give about 8 to 10 minutes to each of the speakers to elaborate on their different area of specialty, mostly related with innovation, but also in a lot of sense, sustainability. And then we will have about 15, 20 minutes, whatever, left for discussion. And please feel free to send in your questions. We want to make it an international dialogue, rather than just between Hong Kong and Shanghai among our panelists. Our first speaker honestly doesn't need too much introduction, but since I have the material with me, I better highlight a few things. And for friends who are around in different parts of the world, I hope that may be useful. Herbert actually is a frequent speaker in many of our TDC events, as well as in many other Hong Kong events. He's an expert in big data. It reminds me actually just now that our financial secretary mentioned that in terms of biodata, Hong Kong have some distinct arrangement with the mainland in the cross-border flow of biodata. Maybe Herbert can let us know more about not just biodata, but any other data-related area of innovation, sustainability, and development between Hong Kong and the mainland. Herbert also has been very active in academics. He's affiliated with Zhejiang University, Tsinghua University, as well as the Hong Kong University. He's active in many of the government committees, advisory roles, both here in Hong Kong, also in Beijing and Shanghai, as well as in Guiyang, in Guizhou province. From my understanding, many of you probably know Herbert when he was with Alibaba Group in charge of the data area. But he is now an active investor in terms of a lot of big data, AI-related area. Without further ado, may I invite Herbert.
Thank you for the introduction and inviting me for this event. In terms of the innovation and sustainability, also that we just mentioned about there's three different directions that we're heading, about China, innovation, and also the sustainability. I think all of this is highly related to data. And as you mentioned that data has two different usage in terms of most of the company. One is for the research and development, and the other is for processing of a transaction, or for example, developing a product. But of course, when we are talking about innovation, I think there's two keyword very importantly that we will mention about that is digital economy. We keep on hearing this two English word, digital economy, and these two digital economies, in fact, first mentioned in 1995. It's pretty early. In 1995, when a Canadian mentioned about these terms, but at that time, at that point of time, he's mentioned that has to do with the network effect or the network effect of our economy. So digital economy and the network effect is all come together. So when we talk about network effect, we will have to talk about the connectivity of our world in terms of the device, in terms of the company, in terms of the person. But the keyword digital economy is actually evolving all the time. For example, like when we have the IT coming, a better IT facility coming, when we have a better internet or mobile internet coming, when we have the big data, AI, bot training, all these keywords actually evolving together with the digital economy, and the definition of the digital economy is in fact a change in time. That has to be bear in mind for people who are doing the innovation and the sustainability in the future. But at the same time, we find that the application is propelled by the interconnectivity. The more people are connected with the mobile phone, or the more people are connected with our internet, actually we have the more chance to capturing more data. And the data is in turn helping us to building a more innovative application. It's actually a tool, a circle, right? The better data that we have, the better application that we can build on the top of that. And then the application is come along with the data. And that is why, you just mentioned about, when we can getting the data from China to Hong Kong, in terms of the drugs development or in terms of drugs research, of course, we'll be getting more advanced in terms of the innovation in drugs development, because the data can help us to know more of what happened to the patient or to the environment. And I just want to quickly compare in between the innovation change in strategic assumption on the analog world, if you can analog work to the digital age. But I'm not going to change one by one. But there's a major difference in here is in the new world, actually we're doing a lot of vapor experimentation. With the vapor experimentation, we don't build product primarily on the finished product. We actually build it in the developing, testing, and the learning mode. And while we're doing this, we need a lot of data for helping out. For example, like if you're looking into a Google page, homepage, or Alibaba homepage, in fact, they are doing more than 2,000 testing or 2,000 experiments in one page, but you didn't know that when you are using a single screen, right? So vapor experimentation become very, very important in innovation. And then that we can understand the innovation we're talking about is no longer the same as the innovation that we're talking about in 30 years ago. It's really different because we need to have the data to helping us develop and test and then learn from the experience, from the data that we are capturing. There's 4 data rules I want to mention in here. That is that we always, when we're talking about data, we always to start with the question, not with the data. And the second is, based on the equation of your business, on the matrix that matter to your company. You really need to know when you build a product, what do we mean by success and what do we mean by fail beforehand, other than doing the product and then find out what is happening with the product. We have to do that beforehand and then get enough the understanding of the product. The third one is to focus on the decision, action, and design for the feedback. That is actually particularly important when you want to doing a pilot, when you're wanted to doing an internet product, for example. You need to make a decision based on, for example, like in a page, how big should be the image, like in order to helping our customer to understand the product. Should that be bigger or should that be smaller? You're actually not the guy to design that. The customer will tell you when you launch the product for the user to use. Then you take action after the A/B test, right? After you're making a bigger image and a small image, then you take the action, and that is what I mean, design for the feedback. The fourth one, more important, is embrace transparency. Make it trivial, easy for people to connect, contribute, and collaborate their idea. Sometimes it's also data. Make them easy to contribute their data, their information to you in order to make you more innovative. So there is a word say, if I don't have the data, after all, I'm data poor. But there's another meaning say, you have a poor data, it means that also that you are data poor. Because it doesn't mean you have a lot of data, then you are data rich. It's because you have a better data, you have a good data, so that you are not data poor, right? And then that's a very important the misconception that a lot of people think that I have many data. But I will say if you have a poor data, most of them, those are poor data, you are not data rich. The second one is that even if you are data rich but you have insight poor, it also means that you got a lot of the data resources, but you are not able to use the data for the value of the company, and then you will still fail. Then talking about the sustainability of data, right? If we are not being trusted by our customer of the way that we are using data, that is actually a sustainability problem because people are not trusting you. There's a data ethics issue when I'm using your data for the product as well. So innovation and the sustainability is come together when we talk about data-driven within our product or data-driven innovation. We really have to understand that the good use of data is in fact a very important experience for our customer as well. So it's come to my brief, introduction of my section. Thank you.
Thank you, Herbert. Thanks for the detailed elaboration. Actually, it raised me a lot of questions when you talk about the data pool and data insight pool issue. Let's hold it back until our discussion. Anyway, our next speaker is from Shanghai, Lucy. Again, for many of you, you may not need an introduction, but Lucy is famous in a lot of rankings in terms of Forbes, in terms of E&Y, Ernst & Young, and Finnish. She has been rated so many times as some of the most powerful businesswomen and entrepreneurial area or young leaders. She is a co-founder and president of Airwallex, which, to be honest, I don't understand too much about Airwallex, and I hope Lucy can give us some insight about it. That is something on the fintech area, which I understand is to facilitate fund transfers, particularly in cross-border with time and so as cost effectiveness. Let's welcome Lucy. And Lucy, please. Sorry.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lucy, and I am the co-founder of Airwallex. We are a global fintech platform that is helping business grow in every part of the world. And while we're basically a very new company, we're turning 6 years old this year, headquartered in Hong Kong. So basically, I think there are a lot of new business opportunities that we're seeing, especially the changing landscapes of globalization and digitalization in the past few years. A lot of our customers are actually, digital native companies who are basically born online. And we're seeing a lot of extraordinary growth in different sectors across e-commerce, digital, and logistics. Even though travel sector has been largely impacted by COVID in the past few years, overall, I think we can see that the companies are becoming more reliant on digital payments, and like Herbert said, also on data and other types of innovations. And while we are transitioning into what we call the digital age, a lot of companies are still very reliant on I guess traditional ways of completing their financial transactions and digital and payments. Data shows that 80% of B2B payments are still done by paper, and I think as we grow into the digital era, there are definitely more opportunities and potentials for businesses to, I guess, either transition from offline to online or build their new business models, based on the more tech-driven financial infrastructure. And I think that's exactly where Airwallex adds value, and also helping businesses build regardless of where they are and what type of business models they operate from. And then on the topic of sustainability, I think that's almost a given. If a business wants to succeed over time, and the model itself has to be very long term and be built on a very sustainable model, which will, I guess, help in the long term for the business to scale, and also, because we're in the B2B space, help our customers grow as well.
Thank you. Before we go on to the discussion, let me get our first speaker. Mark Yong has a very interesting career, actually. Mark was a molecular biologist and from Oxford, and he has spent some years in some pioneer research before he switched to his current area of logistics. He has been spending time in Vietnam, Cambodia, China, and a lot of places. Just now, before we start, when we are discussing, he's one of the victims of the current virus restriction on travel. I understand he has to travel a lot of places and try to get away to skip away from or minimize the quarantine period behind bars. His area is interesting in the sense that we know that Hong Kong has been famous in different areas, finance, data, technology, and those things, but also in a lot of logistic development. So maybe we can have Mark enlighten us how he sees his business developing in this region, as well as how innovation as well as sustainability affects his business. Mark, please.
Well, thank you, Nicholas, and thank you, everybody. Hello, everybody in the virtual world. Nice to see you back. And so I don't have a script, and I follow through Herbert and Lucy's actually presentation. It's very, very good when you talked about big data and all that stuff. So just briefly, Bloom Global is a multimodal supply chain platform. So what we do is we are connected to major ocean carriers, the ships. We're connected to the major air carriers, the aeroplanes that air freight cargo. We're connected to the major railroad companies, particularly in the States. And we also connected to a lot of trucking companies on behalf of clients. So that's it, a supply chain platform. So what we do is we offer visibility, not only where are your goods are at this moment in time, but will it be on time or not? If it's not going to be on time, what are the other options? We also do this, I be careful my choice of words, very glorified way of predictive ETA, where we have an algorithm where we have 26 years, 27 years of historical data, like Herbert mentioned, big data. We had to refine it recently because all the port congestion in the States and rest of the world, and also ships omitting ports in various parts of the world. So put it into context of innovation and sustainability. So one of the pillars, a few pillars what Bloom we believe in, is actually helping to reduce waste in the transportation industry. We spent, as part of moving goods around the world, 18 trillion US dollars, of which 1 trillion US dollars is wastage, empty moves, empty miles. So in the context of Greater Bay Area, you see you have 37 ports, you have 4 airports, you have thousands of truck companies. So they go within the Guangdong area and also Hong Kong, etc. There must be a lot of empty moves. So we aim to capture that. And just to bring it into the innovation part, if you look at prior to COVID, a lot of, I'll put it very simple in where we can understand, the trucking companies, etc., truck drivers, they always want paper. The customs, they always want paper. Yeah, companies, I want a stamp. Nobody dares to touch paper now, right? Because of COVID. So that has driven the digitalization or digitization as well. So get rid of paper. So what does that mean? So mobile apps, data transferring from system to system is becoming the key driver, the trend now. So that's helped our business a lot, actually. So one thing we're trying to do, innovation not only applies to big companies. Because we are a cloud platform, we also want to help small companies. So shipping lines, they're going to be big. Yeah? Air freight carriers, they're going to be big. Railroad companies, they're going to be big. But trucking companies, you can have one truck company, one truck driver. You can have one truck company, 100 truck drivers, 100 trucks as well. So you can go big, small, big, medium, and small. So that's how we can capture. And so let me backstab a little bit. We were actually exploring where to set up our office, as we are a US headquartered company. We explored various parts of Asia, and we chose Hong Kong as the choice. Because we can not only serve Asia, we also have a backdoor to China. So, and we are very excited with this Greater Bay Area opportunity, and we hope to explore more. And you look at within the Greater Bay Area, if you fly within 5 hours, you capture 50% of the population worldwide. So that's the kind of interesting fact for us to explore and work together. So I think I'll stop there, and I have plenty more to discuss, but I think, and let me tell you also the industry trends. So I talked about visibility, not only where your goods are at this moment, but will it be on time? Yeah. So the other one is the dynamic order management. I think, Herbert, you mentioned, I think Lucy quoted a little bit about sourcing and the placing the order. You place it 6 months in advance, etc. So now, because of dynamic interaction of data, you can have dynamic order management where the buyers of goods can actually interact with the producer of goods in a more interactive manner, reducing waste. So that's innovation applying to sustainability as well, so that you don't not waste things as well. So that's one thing we do. The other thing also is reduce paper and faster, and therefore faster capture of data, faster payment. And that helps small companies to survive as well. So the other part as well, we talk about the interaction within the Greater Bay Area. How does Hong Kong fit into that? So we would like to see more, more interaction, especially the airports, because there's 70% overlap between the airports, within the 4 key airports within the Greater Bay Area. If that's increased work can be done, that will help it to be more sustainable within the Greater Bay Area. So I think I'll be open to questions, I think, Nicholas. Yeah, thank you.
Honestly, there are quite a number of questions. But one question comes from the floor, which I think can easily be tackled first, is to Lucy. which is something actually Mark has touched about. Airwallex itself is a fintech unicorn started in Australia. Why do you headquarter it in Hong Kong? Like Mark might have in some area.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, I think to answer that question, we are a global business. And I think like I said, in the digital era, we see ourselves as a digital first company that, by definition should be able to be operated from anywhere. But specifically to Hong Kong, I think it is a very important location to us. And it serves as a bridge between our APAC business and our international markets. So I think physically it is a headquarter, but we are a very truly global company, and we have actually a lot of senior leaders in different locations, and everyone is online these days. So yeah, I think that's sort of my, short answer to that question.
In fact, I see the next question, which is addressed to Herbert, is somewhat related. It's also about the choice of location and cross-boundary issues. You handle about data flows, and quite a number of those flows are between Hong Kong and the mainland. We understand those are two very different regimes in terms of data management or regulations. Some people may think that it may be easier for data to flow from Hong Kong to mainland, but probably not vice versa. But in your experience, to what extent you believe that is something which can offer an opportunity or require your innovation to bridge the flow to make it more sustainable and beneficial for both sides?
I think that is not an easy question to answer. For example, when Mark mentioned about that, we want to connect the data together in different areas. Of course, different company will have a different data standard, right? Or even when you're talking about the API, will have a different format. Even for the supply chain, for the shipment, for the air, for the, all of them have a different, shall we say, language, right? Then when you want to put them all together, and as the platform, you really want them to using one schema. But it's really hard to convince people to doing that, right? And that is why primarily hard for us to having data flow from one place to the others. But then when we're talking about city to city, of course you will have a different, for example, like Hong Kong and Guangdong has a different compliance regulation or rule of law. And once you put that together with that standard, it will make it harder to having data to transfer. But lucky that because we have a GBA in here, we can convince people saying, in order to make GBA better, we needed to have the data flow easier than the other place, because this is so, the reason why people come to GBA is because GBA have an opportunity for the better data flow or better other flow. For example, money flow, car flow, or even information flow, for example, like data. So it's not that easy to having data flow so easily. But that is actually the task that we need to do every day to convince people that how can we make this easier for people to travel along. And that's why we have an embassy, right? And so U.S. have an embassy in Hong Kong, and then different countries have an embassy in Hong Kong. The reason why they have an embassy, because in that area is naturally in an embassy that you're actually following the law of your country. So we can convince, in one place where we can, having data come to Hong Kong, but the compliance of the usage of the data will follow from the country that's sending the data from that area. It make data easier to throw around. But then I still wanted to emphasize that it's not just the compliance, but it's also about each of the company will have their own schema of data, and to make it hard to having the data flow from one place to the other. So that's why I say it's hard to answer, but come together, we need to do work together with the government to the industrial sector. And of course, I will think that supply chain will be, and even finance will be a good starting point. The reason why I say this, because there is a business there. Whenever there is a business there, we have the demand of the data flow. So when there is a demand of the data flow, it's much easier to convince people to doing that, because there is a value for the city or for the place. So people will try to break it through because there is enough value for us to break it through.
Maybe to follow the same question, actually, it applies to across the board, the different area, from finance to data to logistics. That the Greater Bay Area itself, many people say it is an opportunity because the market is so big. But the other opportunity as well as challenge is that it comprises quite a different type of systems operating. Just like Mark mentioned that in the Greater Bay Area, we have 4 major airports, quite a number of major ports, and a lot of resources connecting this or using these facilities need to be more synchronized or tuned together. In finance, we see the example of the different kind of stock connect, bond connect, and now wealth connect, and talking about insurance connect. But that is an interesting type of integration because the two systems are still different between the Hong Kong system or international way of doing things versus the mainland system. To what extent logistics probably can borrow from this experience of the finance, that you see by connecting those ports, you use very specific channels or ways or contained way of connections to facilitate a broader and broader integration. Are there any things that we can think of in terms of your work or your achievement there?
I hope I can try to answer. So if I can just start off with it within the port itself first. So you can start off with the port, because the subject can go on forever. Yeah. So port, you can have its own community, the port. Then you can go around within the port area where the trucks interact with the port. Then you can go into the region, okay, the barge and the trucks and the trains, so a broader community. Then you have a kind of partnership with certain ports, with other ports in other geographies. So you extend that network. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. Also, in terms of data, we're talking about data. One of the ways, because we are cloud-based and we use a US provider of service, but for China, we actually use a China provider. So that helps to bridge that great wall, so to speak, of the data transfer. So that facilitates the data transfer for our customers that have a Chinese network. The China network, though, the data is able to transfer across quite seamlessly, actually. So we don't have any issues with that front. So I hope that answers a little bit.
Yeah. Actually, it helps me to bring the thing back to Herbert. You mentioned about the different kind of data flow issues as well as opportunities. To what extent do you think the way that the finance are doing it by compartmentalize the different channels, the different type of data flows to make it work together? Like, for instance, they start with the stock connect, north flow, south flow, or both way for one direction. And then they extend it to another type of capital flows through the bond market, but only for a long time, only one way until recently 2 ways. But still, these are contained channels of flows, which can facilitate a broader flow going forward, hopefully. Data, to what extent that we can borrow that type of methodology to bridge the gap or between the two, or make it grow wider and wider?
There's two things here, right? One is the friction, right? The friction for the data flow to having the data flow better. There's a friction there. And then there is an incentive, right? If the incentive is bigger than the friction, right, people will try to fix it. Okay. So as you mentioned about the finance, right, there's a law flow and a south flow in terms of the investment arrangement right now. And the reason why, because that incentive or building that bridge is higher than the friction to fix that. So that in order to do that, we have arranged a custodian, right? Or we call it trust. So someone who add in here to say, we will follow the same principle to doing that, right? So that to protect against the risk of having the money flow out of control, right? So that there's a custodian or monitoring or trust, for whatever we say, but there's some mechanism for us to protect against the money flow leakage. And if we're talking about that to extend a little bit more into data, it will be the same thing. When you having data flow from one area to the other area, from A to B, A was worrying that when the data flowing to B, and B has a less ability to protect against the data. So A worry about that. So I would say that, so you have to compromise. I mean, you have to build up a better data security in order to make me feel I can trust you. So that's the different level of data security protection. It's not just from country to country, but also from company to company. So in order to doing that, unless if you build up a organization to say that, okay, if everyone are following the same principle within the same group of company, then we will trust each other. Then we can have the data flow together. So that's a short answer for such a difficult topic.
One suggestion, actually, coming from your insight is that maybe you need a kind of Hong Kong exchange or maritime authority or data authority to be set up to facilitate as a custodian, as a trusted institute to bridge both sides.
Or blockchain.
Yeah.
Right.
Blockchain.
Or blockchain.
Okay. Back to Lucy, actually. Your area is the most developed in that aspect. As I mentioned, there are many different channels created in the finance side to facilitate the cross-border flows, particularly between the mainland and Hong Kong and a wider area. I understand your business is mostly in the exchange area, but to what extent your company or your broader perspective or your sector would develop in the same direction, or to what extent this is the percent of opportunities for business worldwide to come to use Hong Kong and build the kind of institution, capture the kind of opportunities you see?
Yeah, so I think Hong Kong is definitely on the right track to enable an environment that supports the growth of fintech and companies like ours. And it definitely plays a quite important role in our growth. We do use it as a connector between mainland China and our other geographical regions because of its unique location. Also, in terms of regulations, it's I guess quite combined. So we're able to support our customers really in different markets through Hong Kong. And in the past few years, we also seen positive steps where Hong Kong is supporting fintech's growth by traditionally is an international financial hub. So combined with technology, it provides a very strong foundations for business to grow. And I think there's a lot of resilience in its financial markets there's a wealth of capital talent in the financial services. Adding on top of that, also attracts professional services people to transition from traditional financial services into more fintech areas. I think specifically to us, we've been making a lot of hires in the professional services area, where people can bring in traditional finance knowledge, and we can really look into how we can digitize that and build technology platforms on top of that. Airwallex has invested years into building our own financial infrastructure on top of traditional finance, because we want to help businesses save time and money when they are building either applications on top of what we're building, or we're helping their businesses grow. So to give a few examples, we're working with a number of finance related applications where they don't really have a payment infrastructure or payment functionality. Could be equities trading or insurance, but as they want to grow more globally, they would need that. But building that themselves will take years. Whereas working with Airwallex, it could be in a matter of 3 to 6 months, and their new product could be online. And I think that's the value of technology and how companies can work together. The market is massive. We don't envision to do everything ourselves, but we really want to enable other businesses to do that and save time and energy and resources, and that they should really be focusing on their primary business as opposed to worry about the infrastructure side or investing into areas where they don't necessarily need to spend too much energy in.
Okay, thanks. Let's switch a little bit of the topic. In fact, when I first take up this job to moderate, I look at the title, Capturing New Business Opportunities via Innovation and Sustainability. Give people an impression that innovation and sustainability has to go hand in hand to offer this kind of opportunity. But in reality, it may not be that case. I'm sorry, I'm probably talking about something politically incorrect. But I think the purpose of the session is to inspire and provoke different thoughts. Other areas, actually, innovation is something most people subscribe to, same as sustainability. But when you bring things into business opportunities, there may be cases you can innovate, but may not that sustainable, or vice versa, maybe sustainable, but probably don't need too much innovation anyway. In the Hong Kong context, just now, Financial Secretary had mentioned that the Hong Kong ecosystem has been very supportive for innovation. But from your own experience, we are very supportive, but definitely there are still areas we need to improve to make it more friendly and more successful. First, innovation. Second, sustainability. Can you name one or two things, if each of our speakers tell us that where you see Hong Kong can do more to make our innovation or sustainability area to go further, or even better, to have both be improved together? Yeah. May I start with Mark? Yeah.
Well, thanks, Nico. Well, I'll start very basics then. If you look at the airport, for instance, the aeroplanes, you have pushback and you start your engines. So the very simple stuff, you can have those electric towers. That's one simple thing you can do. And if you look at the ships, not so relevant in Hong Kong, but in other ports where there's a lot of congestion. So they use low sulfur fuel and also very heavy sulfur content, high sulfur content fuel. So that's very polluting. So now they're moving to the lower sulfur fuel. So it's less polluting, but still bad air, produces bad pollution. So this, if you reduce the time the vessels dock, so in the Hong Kong context, that you can reduce pollution, reduce wastage of fuel as well. So one of the key things is the cross-border facilities, the trucking. A lot of wastage in terms of dwell times, waiting, and also empty returns. So if you can make sure that, just like a bus coming from one place to another, if it goes back empty, you're reducing the miles, you're wasting the journey. So that's something that very easy to exploit, actually. And that's already happening in the logistics industry. I can tell you one thing that we are doing for rail in US. In Asia, we produce goods for the consumers. So a lot of full cargo, but the containers, in principle, have to come back empty in most of the time. So we actually partner with a lot of local companies in US where they use those empty containers for domestic cargo, and they reduce the cost of empty positioning. So that's something that can apply in Greater Bay Area, you can say. Yeah.
Thanks. Hubert?
I think Mark just mentioned very importantly that we start with problem first. So he was to mention that there's a problem, right? There's a lot of empty ship there. There's a problem, not with the data. But then the second one is, if you interpret what Mark was just mentioned into an equation, well, what happened, right, is that there's a volume of ship that are folding, but then there's also an empty ships, that are also happening. So how can we build this formula in order to let people understand what happened with this problem, right? And then we can start to design the feedback loop, where I can get this data. How do I know that how much percent of this ship is actually in fact empty now? That's the third one, right? That's the 4 rules that I just mentioned about there. Once we know that, we make people easier to contribute. There's a lot more shipping company outside there. They can work with Mark in order to understand more what is happening in there. So he's actually solving in a problem in a more innovative way to helping the subsidiarity of such a problem. So that illustrates, each of the problem that we actually face every day in Hong Kong. Not just that the shipment, but there's a lot of wastage in this city. But it's just that we are lack of incentive to measure that, to make that into an equation, to make people easier to understand or even visualize what is happening. How many of this lunchbox has we been used every day, and then what is happening with those lunchbox, and what is that damage the city of Hong Kong or even to the world. Then when people look at that, they will understand that, okay, that is actually hurting us in this city. Then we will do something about it. So problem, and then there's the equation there, and there's a data connection mechanism in there with the feedback, right? And then we're going to get more of this data to helping this problem. So I'm not going to put it into a specific scenario, but then I think a lot of people, friends virtually in this meeting right now, that you can get this into. The problem is that most of the company are focused on the expected positive matrix in the company in a short term, because that is what we call efficiency. When we focus too much onto the efficiency for the KPI of the company, of course, you will lack of the vision on the effectiveness. You focus on too much on the efficiency, then you lost track on the sustainable part of the company. In fact, the sustainable part is for the long-term goods of the company as well. If you can balance in these two, one is the short-term goal, the other is a long-term sustainability together. And if that tool actually is helping or is actually can let the customer know, the customer will select their own to say that I'm going to use this company's service because this company know how to earn money. At the same time, helping the world or helping Hong Kong to be more sustainable.
Thanks for that. How about Lucy?
Yeah, so I think, finance specifically is a very interesting area. And I think, Hong Kong, I would say in that context is still quite traditional. People's willingness to accept change and shift in mindset is probably something that wouldn't happen overnight. And, even just speaking from personal experience or the company's experience, we still use paper quite a lot in Hong Kong. And, but that, like I said, it takes time and, it's, from whether the regulatory side or from the banking side of things, we can, as companies or tech companies can innovate as much as we can, but if the bank is sending us paper statements, that wouldn't work, right? So I think it's an industry effort, and it's also, an ecosystem effort as well. So it's not just us; it's how we can actually integrate with our partners digitally through APIs, making sure that there's efficient flow of data and also efficient flow of information where we can actually build a platform that is truly innovative and progressive and is able to grow as the businesses grow or adapt to different type of business models. So I think in short, so I think the job of innovation and sustainability, and it's not just for new companies or for big companies, right? It's basically for everyone. Whether when we can support each other in that context, that's when we can really build something new and grow together as an ecosystem and as a whole industry.
Thank you. I still have quite a number of questions from the floor, actually. I don't think I will finish that. I have enough time to finish that, but I will try to get a more generic one to put on the table. One question is that sustainability costs money to implement. Innovation also needs investment. And Hong Kong is a very expensive city. So all this means that you need money to put things together. So what is your advice for foreign companies who are not in Hong Kong yet to move to Hong Kong to leverage on this vibrant ecosystem and benefit from whatever we can offer here and make good money? Anyone who want to pick it?
Well, I just mentioned how we did our evaluation. We are a U.S. headquartered company. We looking for Asia regional office. So we looked at, of course, other cities, countries, and you talked about sustainability or innovation. For us, is for our selfish purpose, the market opportunity. So, and we wanted to be international and yet also have the handle with the greater China market. So that's one thing. And by coincidence, I had lunch with DHL today, actually, and they said, oh, you are EMEA as well, because my colleague from EMEA, he resigned, so they gave me EMEA. So actually, for Bloom, we are actually, Hong Kong is the hub for Europe and Asia, so you get 2 for 1. So it's very easy to do business via Hong Kong. So for us, transactions are very easy. COVID aside, very easy to move. I mean, this is strange times, right? So it's very easy to move. And I didn't enjoy the quarantine when I came back, but it's very safe in Hong Kong, right? So I don't know what's right or wrong. I've got to be politically correct, but I must say to walk around and feel safe is a blessing. So I think we're on the right track. Yeah.
Friends, any others? Yeah.
I agree with Mark very much that it's about the accessibility of the market, right? Company come to one place because of there is a market there. But then there's another part of there is that do we have enough digital infrastructure here in order to help in, particularly on digital infrastructure I'm talking about, because all the other infrastructure there is not really, some of them are not very suitable for a new innovation company. As a new innovation company come to Hong Kong, we needed to have building a infrastructure for them, particularly on the digital infrastructure. One I can mention here about is that even for the green finance is actually one of the structure we're talking about here. And then for how could we make data flow easier internationally is also one of the infrastructure for company like Mark. So that is a new infrastructure we need to think about in the next 3 years. To think about what can we do in Hong Kong to having that infrastructure. Market in China, in China is big. Everyone know about that. So what people want to come to Hong Kong to access to the market of China, but at the same time, is Hong Kong a place in here to providing me the infrastructure here to easier or maybe more efficient, effective to tackling this market?
Thank you. Lucy, you have anything to add? Or?
I think from a startup perspective, right, I actually think Hong Kong is a very good testing ground. We test a lot of our new products in Hong Kong because of its, access to international markets and also relevance to, Greater China. So, in terms of capital, of course, I agree. Hong Kong is quite expensive to operate in, but there's actually also investment in Hong Kong, right? So the capital market is actually quite active in Hong Kong. So there is money in the market, and it's really about what problem you're solving. And as a business, whether you have attractiveness to draw capital from the market. So obviously, every company's context is a little bit different. But I would say, it's definitely a good testing ground from a startup perspective if you want to launch something new. Because obviously, if you're targeting the whole Greater China, it's too big, right, for any new product to see, product market fit. Whereas Hong Kong, in terms of population, in terms of, a lot of scenarios, is actually very good. So I think from that perspective, I would say, do your studies and launch small, but try to grow big, as opposed to over-investing and, in that case, then the costs and benefits might not weigh out and balance each other.
Okay, thanks. I understand time is out anyway. Organization's been signaling me to terminate, but I still have one thing I want to borrow from Herbert, that to look at Hong Kong is whether it's expensive or not. It's just like look at data whether it's rich or poor. It depends on the cost and benefit. So if it's something that is expensive, but on the other hand, it's give you a lot of benefit, then it's still a very cheap place to operate. Let's thank all our panelists for the sharing, and hope you could stay on and to the rest of our program, and hope to see you in person as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for all our panel speakers. Let's give a big applause to them for the inspiring discussion.